A day remembering victims of historic government oppression gets a cold shoulder from Taiwan's legislature. Will nuclear energy get a second wind? Taiwan passes a bill that could extend the life of nuclear power in the country. Chips ahoy! The US and Saudi Arabia reach a deal on a major AI investment plan. Could Taiwan be one of the winners from this agreement? Plus, US President Donald Trump issues an executive order to lower drug prices at home. But why is that making pharmaceutical companies in Taiwan nervous? And welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. In just a few days, Taiwan is set to remember the victims of decades of government oppression with White Terror Memorial Day. But a bill recently passed by the opposition-led legislature appears to exclude the day from a list of important memorial days, renewing debates over how Taiwan treats its checkered past. Rick Glauert has more.
Calls for victims of Taiwan's authoritarian past to be remembered properly.
删除记忆日，删除记忆日，删不去百孔历史，删不去百孔历史。
Civil rights groups and ruling party lawmakers take aim at Taiwan's main opposition parties, who, they say, recently removed a public memorial day on May 19th, marking the beginning of the White Terror period, 4 decades from 1949, when the nationalist government targeted those opposing their power, killing thousands of people and imprisoning more than 100,000.
他们的目的是想要删除、抹除台湾人的历史记忆哦。他们希望说，我们的后代子孙都不要记得哦，最好不要记得什么叫白色恐怖的历史，也都不要记得。
For many victims of government oppression, justice has still not been delivered. Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, government has been pursuing what's known as transitional justice, exonerating past political prisoners, redistributing ill-gotten gains, and giving millions of US dollars in compensation. And, in 2024, creating a new day to commemorate the victims of the period. But this day, White Terror Memorial Day, was not included in a recent public holiday and Memorial Day bill passed by this legislature, which, significantly, is in the hands of 2 main opposition parties, the Kuomintang, or KMT, and the Taiwan People's Party. It's the latest issue to ignite deep partisan politics in the country. The KMT, the party descended from the nationalist government behind the White Terror, says it is upholding the memory of that period, and that when they were in office, they established a public holiday to mark a government crackdown, acknowledging the past.
这显示国民党一向重视台湾过去的历史价值哦，在这次的讨论中，民主进步党放弃了自身的价值，而在修法中撤回提案，国民党表达非常的遗憾。
The ruling party rejects these claims and has been criticising the KMT-led public holiday bill.
我们反对仓促的上路，反对仓促的立法，甚至是在表决的前一刻才看到手上的修正动议。那甚至是我们在委员会里面讨论到的，包括我提议的婚姻平权的纪念日、白色恐怖的纪念日，还有1996总统直选的国家主权日，全部都没有被放在最后的修正版本。那我也认为非常的遗憾。
Bad blood between the 2 major political parties has reached new heights since the DPP lost to the legislature. And one of the many things they fundamentally disagree on is how to face up to the country's violent past.
For the second half of it, there are more controversy about, at the same time, the country began to develop quite swiftly. But on the other hand, there was still continuing oppression. And that is a quite mixed thing. And so it complicates people's narratives, people's collective memories.
Taiwan will mark White Terror Memorial Day in just a few days, perhaps for the last time as an official commemoration. The country is still reckoning with one of the darkest chapters in its history. And now, as political divisions deepen, The question of how to remember that history has become a renewed source of contention. Andy Xue and Rick Lowett for TaiwanPlus.
Prosecutors have indicted 3 county officials from Hualien in eastern Taiwan in an investigation linked to ongoing mass lawmaker recalls. Hualien County legislator Fu Kunqi, who is also the opposition Kuomintang caucus whip, is facing one such takedown campaign. Local residents who signed petitions to recall him said they were approached by county officials at their homes over their participation in the campaign. Prosecutors say the officials used city records to track down recall participants, which is beyond the scope of their authority. Opposition lawmakers have passed amendments that could allow for a 20-year extension of a nuclear reactor's lifespan. The government says Taiwan's last working reactor at the Manshan nuclear power plant will still be decommissioned on May 17th, according to law. But the changes would make it possible for it to be reactivated in the future. That would require the ruling Democratic Progressive Party to give its approval for safety checks and inspections before the plant is granted a renewal license. The DPP has opposed nuclear power over safety concerns and is currently on track to complete its goal of making Taiwan nuclear-free by 2025. For more on the amendments to extend nuclear power in Taiwan, Issy Wells spoke with Ye Zhongguang, distinguished professor from National Tsinghua University.
Taiwan's last nuclear reactor will still be decommissioned later this week, but after the passing of these amendments, what actually needs to happen for it to come back online again?
I think the opposition party has already opened a door for the government to return to nuclear energy. But it is not mandatory for the government to continue the use of nuclear energy. It would actually depend upon the decision by President Tsai. He has to give definite answers to the people that if he is really going for a nuclear-free homeland forever, or he may change his mind in the future. So it's not a technical issue. It is a political issue.
Now, people who oppose nuclear power say opposition lawmakers rushed through those changes without properly considering safety and nuclear waste concerns. Are those concerns valid?
That's why there is a process of safety check and system testing. We will not restart the nuclear power plant until we are able to make sure it would be safe during future operation. There are already processes to deal with nuclear waste. So it's not really a problem. But besides, we are actually following the international approach for dealing with nuclear waste. We are not doing this alone.
And why are opposition lawmakers pushing for a nuclear revival?
They want to make sure Taiwan is going to have additional clean electricity for the future. And it must be also sufficient. And the other reason is, of course, the Taiwan Power Company has been facing very serious financial deficit in the past 3-4 years. And with the cheap nuclear energy to be continuously adopted for the future, the income of Taiwan Power Company will be increased, definitely. And I personally agree with them on these two issues, because these two issues have been troubling Taiwan for quite a few years.
That was National Tsinghua University distinguished Professor Ye Zhongguang. Donald Trump has met with Syria's President Ahmed al-Sharaa in Saudi Arabia. It comes just one day after the US president announced that his country will lift years-long sanctions on Syria. Tiffany Wong reports.
cheers in Damascus as people celebrate what they hope marks the start of a new era. On Tuesday, U.S. President Donald Trump announced plans to lift sanctions on Syria after a meeting with Saudi Arabia's crown prince. These sanctions, targeting the government of former Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad, had isolated the country for over a decade.
I thank Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, King Salman, and all the Saudi people for this moment of chivalry. Their support has been with us from the day we began the revolution until now. A million thanks.
Trump said the decision was made due to a recent change of leadership in the civil war-torn country. In December 2024, current Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa led an offensive that overthrew the Assad regime.
There is a new government that will hopefully succeed in stabilizing the country and keeping peace. That's what we want to see in Syria. I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
The decision marks a major shift in U.S. Middle East policy and signals a move towards normalizing relations with Syria's new government, a step welcomed by the United Nations.
It was important for us to see relief on sanctions on Syria, to help the reconstruction of Syria, to help the Syrian people recover from more than a decade of conflict, a decade of underinvestment.
It comes during Trump's first state visit of his second term, a tour of Gulf states to discuss investment and foreign policy, where other major deals are being made, including a $142 billion arms deal between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, the largest defense sales agreement in history, according to the White House. It includes plans for state-of-the-art weapons and services for Air Force advancement and air and missile defense. As Trump moves to thaw relations with Syria, some observers are urging caution.
You don't want to go whole hog in and invest in any particular regime, because even though they've stayed for 6 months, there's no guarantee that they're going to continue beyond 6 months. There's so much sort of at stake and so much up in the air that things can change in really unpredictable ways.
Trump will head to Qatar and the UAE next, where leaders are expected to discuss tech investment, manufacturing, and military cooperation, further shifting dynamics in the Middle East. Patrick Chen and Tiffany Wong for TaiwanPlus.
Beyond weapons, the US and Saudi Arabia have agreed hundreds of billions of dollars in new tech and AI investments. That includes a deal for Saudi Arabia to buy hundreds of thousands of AI chips from NVIDIA. CEO Jensen Huang was among a number of tech bosses in Trump's entourage in Riyadh. But next week he'll be in Taiwan, and rumors are swirling he will make a big announcement. Chris Gorin brings us this report from NVIDIA's Taipei office.
I'm here at what is currently U.S. chip designer NVIDIA's Taipei office, but it may not be that way for long. Local media is reporting that CEO Jensen Huang may announce a new expanded office location in Taiwan next week at Computex Taipei, one of the world's largest tech trade shows. Huang arrives in Taiwan bringing good news, lots of new business. He's coming straight from the Middle East, where huge new tech deals were announced. We're talking tens, even hundreds of billions of US dollars worth of new investments in AI infrastructure in Saudi Arabia and other countries. Some of the biggest names in tech, including Huang, joined President Trump on his trip and met with the Saudi crown prince. So what's in these deals? Well, NVIDIA says they will sell hundreds of thousands of their highest-end chips to Saudi Arabia. There's also U.S. chip designer AMD, $10 billion in AI infrastructure for Saudi company Humane. More deals with OpenAI, Qualcomm, Google, the list goes on. And the moves reflect a broader strategy from the Gulf countries to transition from the world's reservoir of oil to its reservoir of computing power. Now, although there were no Taiwanese company representatives in Riyadh, Taiwan may be the silent winner in these deals. And that's because nearly all of the equipment at the center of these deals is manufactured in Taiwan. NVIDIA's GPUs, AMD's AI accelerators, CPUs in Qualcomm servers, all made by Taiwan chip giant TSMC. And it goes further than that. Taiwan not only makes 90% of the most advanced chips, but also 90% of the data center servers that those chips end up in. Taiwanese companies like Foxconn, Quanta, and Wistron will likely assemble servers that will end up in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi. And that's why companies like NVIDIA may need to expand their operations in Taiwan, starting with new office space. John Su, Scott Huang, and Chris Gorin in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Families of the victims of last year's deadly Jeju air crash have filed criminal complaints against more than a dozen people, including South Korean officials. Victims' families say officials violated the Aviation Safety Act and failed to manage safety risks. 179 people died on December 29th when Jeju Air Flight 2216 overshot the runway and exploded after crashing into an embankment at South Korea's Muan airport. Lawyers say more investigations are needed into the aircraft's maintenance and the decision to land after a bird strike. The crash is the deadliest air disaster to take place on South Korean soil. Coming up after the break, we sit down with the English translator of Taiwan Travelogue, a book that recently made history. Stay tuned.
Thank you for sharing our passion for food and Taiwan. Veggie Island explores the vibrant world of plant-based cuisine.
This is amazing.
While Taiwan on the Rocks uncovers the stories and craftsmanship behind every sip.
Have you ever tried Taiwanese beer?
Are you ready to taste even more of Taiwan?
For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, follow TaiwanPlus on socials. Pika!
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. China's military activity around Taiwan is continuing to ramp up as Taiwan holds its own drills in the country's south. The Defense Ministry says it spotted 35 Chinese military aircraft and 8 naval vessels operating around Taiwan in the 24 hours up to Wednesday morning. 25 of those aircraft entered Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ. This area is not Taiwan's airspace, but acts as a buffer zone for defensive purposes. The military says it also spotted 2 official ships operating near Taiwan. Pharmacists are concerned that a new Trump administration order to cut drug costs in the US could affect Taiwan. There are worries that drug makers may raise prices in smaller markets like Taiwan or even pull out entirely. John Van Trieste reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump is ordering drug makers to cut their prices. A new executive order says companies must sell in the U.S. at the same prices they offer in other countries. Right now, Americans pay nearly 3 times more for prescription drugs than people in other developed nations. In Taiwan, where drugs are relatively cheap, there are jitters about how drug makers could react, because the U.S. market accounts for 1/3 of world spending on medicine, too big to lose. To keep U.S. prices high, companies could raise prices elsewhere. And in a worst-case scenario, they could stop selling to less profitable markets like Taiwan altogether. Pharmacists say cancer patients are among those who stand to lose the most.
是不是药品要停产，还是数量要减少？延长药都可能，专利的药都可能。尤其美国到台湾的，不可以取代的有72种，大部分就是癌症的用药。
Worse yet, cutting-edge drugs could take much longer to reach Taiwan, maybe 3 to 5 years after other countries, as companies focus on profit in big markets like the U.S. first.
所以势必你的上市一定要比美国晚个几年嘛。比如说重大疾病，它目前台湾里面还就是以目前的治疗，它没有很多的选项的哈。那像这种药品就会受到比较冲击，会比较大。
Whether Trump's order will be effective is uncertain, and the government says there's a system in place to make sure Taiwan has a stockpile of medication it needs.
我们的健保署都可以有一个机制，都可以反映到癌症的药，如果对病人有帮助的药，我想我们是绝对国家站在国家的立场、政府的立场，绝对要让它用在病人的身上。
But concerned pharmacists say without higher health insurance premiums, Taiwan could soon find it hard to get the high-end medications needed to keep people healthy. Klein Wong and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Former Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen is at the Copenhagen Democracy Summit, stressing the need for democracy in the face of growing global challenges.
One thing remains clear. That is, democracy and resilience are the bedrock of our future. Taiwan has shown that it is possible to stand firm against authoritarian pressure without losing our openness, our humanity, our democracy.
Tsai shared Taiwan's experience facing pressure from authoritarianism and urged democracies to come up with new strategies to protect their security and economic stability. This was her first time attending the summit in person after taking part virtually for several years. The English translation of the Taiwanese novel Taiwan Travelogue has won a Literary Translation Award from the Asia Society. Author Yang Shuangzi is the first Taiwanese writer to win the Baifang Shell Book Prize. The English version was written by New York-based translator Ling King. It's set during Japan's occupation of Taiwan and explores the relationship between two women, a visiting Japanese writer and her local Taiwanese interpreter. Taiwan Travelogue was also the first Taiwanese novel to win the U.S. National Book Award for Translated Literature last year. The original Chinese version was published in 2020 and won the Golden Tripod Award, Taiwan's highest literary honor. To discuss the book, Jeremy Olivier sat down with Taiwan Travelogue's English translator, Ling King.
So tell us more about this book. Who are these two main characters, and how does the historical setting of the novel shape the relationship?
So our narrator is Aoyama Chizuko, who is a young Japanese writer who's published a very popular work, and she is then invited to Taiwan to kind of give a press tour, give talks, and to write articles to be printed in Japan, telling the Japanese people what the colony is like. This is set in the 1930s, and she meets her Taiwanese interpreter, who is an even younger woman, but a very accomplished linguist, and seemingly, from Aoyama's perspective, a perfect woman who knows everything, is good at everything, and Aoyama becomes very infatuated with this young woman who she calls Qi-jiang, whose Mandarin name is Wang Qianhe, and the story unfolds from there.
Can you talk a little bit more about the power dynamic between them?
I don't want to spoil, but the story is about Aoyama, who very earnestly, so she thinks, wants to befriend and meet the locals, the Taiwanese, the so-called islanders, at their level, and she thinks that they are at her level as well. That's like the premise with which she approaches her relationships, but as we'll see over the course of the book, Qi-jiang sees it quite differently, and she understands that there is inevitable power relation between the colonizer and the colonized, and that no matter how much goodwill there are just certain bounds that can't be overcome and certain blind spots that can't be seen. So the book uses Japanese, Taiwanese, or Hokkien, Hoklo, Taigi, whatever you want to call it, and Mandarin. But in English, because we don't have the characters, we only have the pronunciation, the romanization. I had to make decisions from the very get-go of, okay, do we confuse the reader by saying this is pronounced, Taipei now, but it was pronounced Taihoku then, and that would have been how they pronounce it in conversation. Same for the people's names. So in Japanese, Qianhe's name is Chizuru, but that's not her, all the facets of her name. So the English translation, I think, really challenges readers in some ways more so than the original, by forcing you to remember all the different pronunciations of people's names, the names of places and foods as well.
So the two protagonists of this book, they travel around Taiwan enjoying the local scenery and delicacies. Would these have been familiar to Taiwanese readers today?
I think about half of the dishes mentioned would be, and then half are very much not familiar, either because they're very regional, because they're historical, or because the final banquet involves dishes that even Shuangzi, the author herself, had to do a lot of research to try to imagine. some of these dishes are very much a product of our, culinary history that is no longer widely available.
Why do you think that Yang Shuangzi chose a glutton as the narrator of this story?
Well, I know that part of it is personal, as in she loves to eat Shuangzi. But that also, I think she's invested a lot of research as a literary scholar into the history of Taiwanese food, and there's both the literary desire to kind of attract readers with this, oh, come read about food, look how delicious this sounds, while hiding kind of this undercurrent of very serious themes about power dynamics, about interpersonal relationships, about imperialism. There's definitely that as well, as in, this is just a travelogue, come read about these two young women who eat their way across Taiwan. And there's more to that.
That was Ling King, translator of Taiwan Travelogue by Yang Shuangzi. You can watch the full interview on Zoom In, Zoom Out, available at TaiwanPlus.com and YouTube. Thank you for watching Taiwan Plus News. You can visit the Taiwan Plus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally today, we take you to Fatima, Portugal, where thousands of pilgrims have gathered to pay homage to the Virgin Mary. I'm Yin Khvat. Take care and see you next time.